Super Rugby AU team of the tournament. I meant to have this video out like on Tuesday. I've been having some issues with the data. I extracted it all, asked my kind wife to edit it all into a more readable format. She did so, but I made some errors with the extraction, so it's been a bit of a back and forth to get the data done, but it's done. Yeah, let's go through 15 guys from Super Rugby AU. I believe I may not have any Waratahs, so excuse me for that. There were certainly a few guys who could have snuck in there, but spoiler alert, which is something you're supposed to say before you do that. I haven't put any Waratahs in there, so not something you'll want to be watching if you're a diehard Tars fan, unfortunately. Let's go with some props. And I admit, I probably had a little bit more fun with this lineup than I would have normally. I've picked some more from the heart picks necessarily than from the head. Cobus Eloff from the Rebels. What a fun prop to watch. Now, I couldn't not pick him. I mean, his scrummaging's good, to be honest. He concedes like one less penalty per game. Like less than one penalty per game. So most of the props concede a penalty at least. A penalty plus per game. His average was less than a penalty per game. So he's not getting pinged at scrum time hugely. His run meters per game is 18.1. He averages 18.1 run meters a game, and he's a prop. That's more than Ira Simone, the midfielder from the Brumbies. That's more than Harry Wilson, the number 8 from the Reds. That's more than Isi Naisarani from the Rebels, also big, blockbusting ball carrier. It's a higher average than Ponefa Musili, who is well renowned for having a big ball carrying game. He's all over the place, man. He also manages to win 4 turnovers in the season. Most props were kind of 1 or 2, so bit of add value at the breakdown, bit of ball carrying value, good scrummager. His tackling percentage is pretty low. He's in the 70s, so not the best. That could be a bit higher. This guy is probably a pretty obvious one in Taniela Tupou for your tight head. Also one that's just an absolute joy to watch. 5 bloody tries, man. 5. I think the next best was Harry Johnson Holmes with 2 for a prop. 5 tries, so 1 every other game. That's a very good return. His broken tackles is almost 2 per game. I think he had 17 in the season. The next best from a prop was 11. I think that was Angus Bell from the Tars. So a couple of Tars honourable mentions there. But Tupou, man, 4 clean breaks in the season. The next best prop had 1. His penalties considered as too high with almost 2 a game, and his tackling percentage is too low in the low 70s. But when he hits you, you feel it. So overall, not to mention his scrummaging, which is also generally very good. Tupou, what a unit of a man. Adds that X factor that most guys can only kind of dream of. Hooker was a tough one, but I ended up with going with a force man of Feliti Kaitu'u from the Force, as I mentioned. He's got, the lineout was solid. Not the best lineout in the competition. I think that was the Brumbies, but it was pretty good. He's got the most run meters of any hooker. He loves getting the ball in open space. He's got the most average tackles of any hooker, and his tackling percentage is like 93%, so he's a phenomenal defender. He's even credited with 1 try assist. His turnovers conceded as a touch high, so he does have a black mark on his game, but overall, man, that guy added a heap of value, so really, really pleased to see him have a good season. For locks, I kind of went with a more traditional pick than, like, the props were kind of fun picks more than, traditional picks. A more traditional pick at lock, though, would be Caden Neville from the Brumbies. Caden Neville just has really top traditional core primary lock stats. He's got the second highest number of average lineouts won in the season, so he's a very good lineout taker. He's not a huge meter man. He doesn't get a heck of a lot of run meters. He's got an average of 6.6 run meters per game from an average of 5.5 carries. So he's not getting huge meterage, but he's a big tackler. He gets 10 tackles a game. That's the most of all the locks. And he gets more turnovers won than any locks. He scored 2 tries, so bit of an icing on the cake there for him. But in terms of his core role, absolutely, I think the top performer in Super Rugby AU this season. The other lock I've gone with is from the Reds, and that is Lukan Salakaya Loto. he is not a traditional core role lock, to be fair, and he can play loose forward, which is reflected in his numbers. He's more dynamic than most. He averages 16.6 run meters a game. Remember, that was 6.6 for Neville, so an extra 10 on top for Salakaia-Loto. He is actually the top line-out winner, though. He's the one guy who beats Neville in terms of his work at the line-out. His defensive work does need a bit of improvement, though, because he's another one who's tackling in the 70s. It's high 70s, 79%, but like Neville was in the 90s. So, yeah, that's what I'm talking about. But a good mix, I think. It's nice to have that kind of core of, like, the traditional guy and the more dynamic guy. And Salakaia-Loto's ball handling skills are pretty good as well. Blindside flanker. I've done a bit of a sneaky one here. Bear with me. I've put in Fergus Lee Warner. And I do admit there's a bit of bias, a bit of fanboy with Fergus, because he just does a lot of stuff well. He's not the best guy for anything. A little bit of a jack of all trades. But he's a big all-round 6. I do seem to have a thing for locks, come loose forwards. That kind of Peter Steph Tutoy, Tyke Byrne, that kind of player. I do like that kind of player. 9 tackles per game is pretty high. Like I mentioned, Neville was 10, so he's not much lower than that at 9. His tackling percentage is in the 90s as well. I think it's exactly 90, so pretty good for a number 6. 2 lineouts, 1 per game is more than most guys who play in the loose forwards. A couple of lineout steals, a couple of turnovers, 19 run meters per game. So he's got a good running game, good defensive game, good at set piece. He just brings everything. I really rate the guy. Maybe he's just one guy because he doesn't get any call-ups at Wallabies level. He was even on the bench for the Force for a while. I don't know if I'm watching a different game from people, but I reckon he is a guy who adds a heap of value. Speaking of a heap of value for your number 7, I think Fraser McCrate, or McCrite, however they say it, he was an absolute revelation this season. Now, remember, with Liam Wright getting injured, he ended up getting a lot more minutes than he normally would, old Fraser McCrate. But, I mean, he just put in an absolute shift for the whole season. He's the top turnover man in Super Rugby AU. He averaged more than a pilfer a game. And as I've mentioned heaps of times, you Aussies tend to just have good 7s all the time. And here's another one. He's one of the highest tacklers. He's only behind Tizano, who made a heap for the Waratahs. Another honourable mention for him. He's behind Koteka. He's behind Swinton. And he's behind Godwin. He's behind those guys. But he's the next guy. I think he's 5th. But he gets a good 10 run meters more than any of those guys, and more than 10 then the next guy was 10 run meters less, and even more, like 13 or 14 or 15 more than some of the other guys. So offensively, he was a lot more dangerous, and his tackle percentage was higher than a lot of them as well. So he's a big tackler. He gets through a heap of work. He gets work at the breakdown, and he gets through work with ball in hand. What is not to like about this guy? Absolute class player. Now, a guy who I maybe did the dirty on with 6, but I've shifted him to 8, which I don't usually do for the team of the season, but here we go, is Rob Valtini for the Brumbies. Now, he played only a couple of games at number 8, maybe 2 or 3, but I wanted to get him and Lee Warner in the side. To be fair, Valtini was really, really good this season. I'm very happy with him. He's been a guy who's been kind of coming through the ranks for ages. His seasons have always been cut short with injury, but he finally had a good run. No injuries seemingly this season. He's in the top 10 for tacklers. He gets almost 10 a game, 9.9 tackles a game. His tackling percentage is 92%, which is phenomenal. He won 3 turnovers during the season, which is not something he's really renowned for. He's got 1.7 defenders beaten per game, so he's the second best loosey after Dempsey, another Waratah. So another honourable mention there. But I feel like Valtini got better as the season went on. Like a couple of games towards the end of the season, he was in blockbusting form. I don't know if he just got angry or he was told to really throw his body into it, not to hold anything back. Maybe he has been holding back with all those injuries he's had. I don't know. But either way, as the season got on, he just looked better and better and better for the Brumbies. I know they were missing Samu at the end, who's their more traditional number 8. They're quite different guys. Samu's got better hands than Valtini, but I was liking what I saw from Rob Valtini. Into the backs. Scrum half. I went with another red with Tate McDermott. It's generally between him and Nick White, to be fair, although I thought Joe Powell was pretty good for the Rebels. I thought Kubeli was really good for the Force. Jake Gordon, when he was playing, was good for the Tars. So, yeah, there seems to be a lot of good guys playing in Super Rugby AU at the moment for that number 9 jersey. His passing game, I think, is getting better. It's the one area he gets criticised a bit for. He's got 5 try assists, which is the most for any of the halfbacks. I think Nick White had 3. He gets 2.6 defenders beaten a game, which, this is higher than bloody Rob Valtini, man. This is Tate McDermott. Way more than any of the other scrum halves. I think Gordon was the next, but he was like 1 point something. His kicking game is obviously not as much as Nick White, which is why it's more renowned for, but he gets a lot more run meters. His defensive game, he tackles at 83%, which is more than any of the halfbacks. So, yeah, man, Tate McDermott, really good. Really good. I know White will be the front runner for the Wallabies, but I still think McDermott, and he's another one who I thought kind of got better as the season went on. Number 10, there's probably no doubt about this one. There was maybe a little bit of doubt about it at the start of the season, because Tamua was in decent form, but the Rebels kind of fell off as the season went through. Lolosio looks also very good, but James O'Connor I still think is the top guy. 7 try assists, the top in Super Rugby AU. Averages 13.4 points a game, most in the Super Rugby AU. And obviously, if you're in a winning team, you're going to get more points, but he still converts them. Most average run meters of any fly half with 34.4. Good tackling percentage was 83.8. His goal kicking was good. His decision making as captain, I thought, was also pretty good. There was times when I would question him. They went behind against the Brumbies. He was opting for threes, settled the game down, got the team back into it. I don't know, man. I thought he had a really, really, really good season. Midfielders, I've gone with another guy from the Force here. He didn't play at the very start of the season, but when he came back, his impact was noticeable. Kyle Godwin. And he's been a guy who I've really admired for quite some time. Now, his attacking numbers are not the best. Like, if you want a pure out-and-out attacker in the midfield, you'd probably go with Parise from the Waratahs. Yeah, Parise is from the Waratahs. His numbers were just stupidly high. Absolutely stupidly high, but his defensive numbers are absolutely terrible. So, it's kind of 6 to 1, half a dozen the other. I've gone with Godwin, whose defensive numbers are phenomenal. He still gets 2 defenders beaten per game. Like, Parise was 4.2. Fouquetti was also pretty high. Like, Fouquetti I had initially here, but I switched it to Godwin after seeing some of the defense. So his run meters are a bit low, 22.8, but that's still not bad. Parise was 45 and Pataya was 33, so yeah, not the highest, but his passing rate's really high. He gets a similar amount of passes to Erase Simone, like quite a proper distributor with 11 passes a game. His kicking game's kind of mid-table compared to all the midfielders. His tackling rate, though, 14.25 tackles per game. Now, that could just be that the Force don't have as much ball, but he's still putting in 14 tackles a game. The next best for a midfielder was 8. 14. And the tackling rate is 93.4%. The next best for in terms of percentage was Pataya with 89. Kyle Godwin, man. Yeah, proper Force for the Force, I reckon. Someone a bit less defensively minded, if I can spell his name, is old Hunter Paisami from the Reds. Obviously injured towards the tail end of the season, but he put in a proper shift every game he played. 4 tries in 7 games is a very good return. He has a try assist in there as well. Averages 44.4 run meters, which is behind only Parise with 45.2, as I mentioned earlier. Quite able to kick, similar rate to Erase Simone, whose distribution game was really good for the Brumbies. He's the 3rd highest passer of all the midfielders with 7 per game, so he's behind Godwin and Simone in that regard. But his tackling stats are where he kind of gets let down, only 4 tackles a game. But I think the role he formed with Hamish Stewart was to kind of let Stewart do more of the defensive work and let himself focus on the attack. But that just kind of was what it was. Right, lastly, we'll get into some outside backs. I'll go with this man, Marika Korobete, which is an interesting one because he didn't score any tries. Could not score a try to save his life, old Marika, which is disappointing. But everything else in his game was phenomenal. 3.4 defenders beaten the game. He's the 4th best guy in Super Rugby AU for that. 74.5 run meters per game. 74. Goodness gracious me. Like he's closing in on 80. I guess almost 75. But, I mean, that's just huge for a guy who doesn't score any bleeding tries. Third for offloads in AU, so second for run meters, third for offloads, 5 passes a game. Most of the wingers get 2 or 3, like Wright and Dalgunu. He has 2 try assists, but as I said, just couldn't buy a try. The go-forward ball he gets is just kind of that X-factor irreplaceable. He's like Tupou in that he does stuff that other guys just don't seem to be able to replicate. But unlike Tupou, he just couldn't convert getting the ball over the whitewash. Right winger, if I'm looking at the kind of a specialist right winger, I think if I'm going another left winger, I'd probably go Dalgunu or maybe Wright because they're pretty good. But if I went for a specialist right winger, probably Andy Muirhead from the Brumbies. I've maybe been a bit hard on the Brumbies. I haven't picked a heck of a lot of Brumbies, have I? I just picked them. I didn't count them. But Andy Muirhead, he's the top 10 for defenders beaten per game with 2.7. He gets a clean break a game, and that's over a 10-game period, which is not easy to do, to be that consistent. He averages 40-plus run meters a game, so it's lower than all the left wingers, but higher than all the right wingers. So in that regard, he's very good. He does have an unusually low tackle rate. I think it was in the 50s, which is poor. But overall, I think he is a very dangerous ball carrier. And it's harder for guys on the right wing because people naturally pass better left than they do right. So they doesn't often get as much ball. But, yeah, put in a proper shift. And last guy I have finished off with a Brumby. I don't want to be too hard on the Brumbies. Have I been hard on the Brumbies? Valtini, Neville, Banks, and Muirhead. Not too bad. Tom Banks. He's got a funny kicking style, but it seems to work. 89 run meters a game, the top guy in Super Rugby AU. 1.5 clean breaks a game, the second guy in AU. Good kicking game, as I mentioned. 2.5 defenders beaten per game, it's just outside of the top 10 for defenders beaten. 6 tries, he's equal top in AU. 2 try assists, his tackle rate for a fullback, 75%. Very admirable. He's got to be in that conversation for fullback going forward for the Wallabies. But yeah, Super Rugby AU team of the season. Sorry guys that it took this long to get the thing out. But as I mentioned, I wanted to really dive into the stats and find some gems like the fact that Cobus Eloff gets so many run meters a game. The fact that, I don't know, some of these guys' tackling percentages aren't what they should be. Kyle Godwin's amazing defensive shifts. There's heaps of cool numbers there. It's obviously only the numbers. There's certainly a lot of guys who've been snubbed, but that's just kind of the way it is when you're picking 15 guys. You guys let me know who else you might have had in the team. Sorry to the Tars. I've dropped a heap on honourable mentions there. Hopefully that can kind of satisfy for now. But yeah, you guys let me know your thoughts. Drop the video a like if you managed to get 18 minutes into it. Sorry for the length of it. I've got Patreon, I've got Buy Me a Coffee if you guys want to help support the channel. But otherwise, cheers guys for the watch, and I'll talk to you guys again soon. See you later.